Hello, good day for all of you at the different time zones that are attending this uh, Modeling World International session for Middle East 1. The main issue here is how to deal with the new questions. These are new questions which have been happening not just because of the pandemic, but in fact 5 or 10 years ago, transport modelers and transport planners encountered a number of new questions that are being asked from decision makers. These result from the opportunities that are created by potentially new modes of transport, mobility as a service, the potential of Hyperloop, even in the case of the Middle East, the potential of flying taxis. All of these need to be analyzed. Not all of them are going to respond to the objectives of each country or each city, and therefore needs to be found a way of regulating them as well. There is also the prospect of behavioral change. This has been triggered some years ago by the availability of working from home or procuring services and goods through the internet. In order to research that, we need perhaps new type of models that enable us to look better at the way in which these changes in behavior are going to impact on both the demand and perhaps the supply of transport services. And in order to help us in dealing with these issues, we have the new sources of data that provide us with new ways of looking at transport, perhaps cheaper and faster ways of looking at how transport demand is changing over time. And all of this is involved, is surrounded by the issue of uncertainty. And certainly, uncertainty has been highlighted as a result of the pandemic. So we have here 5 speakers that are going to give us their own take on this issue. We will start with a presentation by Klaus Noekel. He is head of innovation at the software company PTV Group. That will be followed by joint presentations by Abdulrahman Mottahar. He is a general supervisor of transportation at the Saudi Transport Ministry. He will be supported by Dr. Farhan from Imam Abdulrahman University and Saudi Aramco. The next presentation will be by Stephen Bennett from the Integrated Transport Center at the United Arab Emirates, and this will be wrapped up finally by Seshagiri Belamara. He is a senior transport modeler or modeling engineer at the Ministry of Transport and Communications of Qatar. So I hand over to Klaus Noekel now from the Innovation Center at PTV for the first presentation of today. I remind you that you can provide questions in the questions section, and I will be selecting the most relevant ones for the discussion period. Over to you, Klaus. You're mute.
Why that? Sorry, that. Okay, back. Agencies around the Middle East, but also elsewhere, are currently future-proofing their transportation models for tomorrow's policy questions. And if we take a look at the tenders from the region, then we see a clear pattern emerging. The questions that everybody is interested in and struggling with are pretty much the same everywhere. So in my presentation, I would like to describe some of them and explain PTV's approach to them. Since I do not have a lot of time, I will focus on my top 3, which are shared mobility, autonomous driving, and activity-based demand modeling. Let's start with shared mobility, and here we're speaking about all the various flavors of carpooling, ride sharing, ride selling, bike sharing, and so on. Comes with its own set of sub-questions. The first one of which is already how to include those in mode choice. So let's say we're starting with a very simple demand model, any type, with a very conventional choice set for mode choice. And we have those new modes. How do we fit them in? Well, the most straightforward idea is, of course, to just bolt on more options at the mode choice level. But if you do that, then you are missing a very important aspect of shared mobility, and that is its ability to be used in intermodal combination with other modes, particularly with public transport, like here, where travelers use a ride-pooling vehicle to get to a metro station, then take the metro to another part of the city, and use shared mobility maybe again for the final leg. If you keep the modes totally separate, as in the previous picture, you will have a very hard time accounting for those intermodal combinations. So at PTV, we came to the conclusion that it's better to combine shared mobility with public transport in one kind of a super mode, if you want. And then, of course, you only have a single assignment to deal with, a kind of an extended public transport assignment. That's what we actually do. And the approach that we're using in this assignment is the same kind of super network approach that we've been using for conventional public transport already. So there already we use a super network for all the transit submodes, and transit submode choice is actually delegated to public transport assignment as part of route choice. So we just keep adding more and more links also for the shared mobility options in the network. And then we perform connection search across this enlarged super network. Gives you a couple of very important advantages. It covers both intermodal and unimodal use of shared mobility. And since we are starting already with a dynamic stochastic assignment for public transport, and add transfer locations basically at any node or any stop in the network, we end up with relatively high resolution in time and space for this assignment. Of course, we need to generate the demand responsive parts of the network on the fly, and for that we embed a dispatcher into the assignment method. That will also give us the stochastic elements of impedance. Wait and write times for ride pooling, of course, are stochastic, an unusual feature in public transport assignment. But otherwise, we actually minimize the use of simulation, especially compared to a full agent-based simulation of everything, because A, it cuts down on simulation noise, and B, it makes the solution fast enough so that you could also use it as a part in, let's say, a bi-level optimization problem of station locations, like deciding where to put ports for an urban air mobility system, just to give an example. Okay, then next, let's look at autonomous driving. And now we're not dealing with the services that we saw already. We're now dealing with the traffic flow aspects of it. Here, PTV joined a European Union funded research project called Coexist, which focused on the transition period, the messy part where automated and conventional vehicles will coexist on our streets. And this was an opportunity that was particularly attractive for two different reasons. First of all, it was not based on speculation, on theory about traffic flow. Instead, we were able to use observed AV behavior, natural driving data, if you want, for AVs from various field test sites. Secondly, the objective of the project was to form a very general consensus on best practice modeling of AVs. And for that reason, for example, the project was also twinned with similar activities in North America. If you're curious, the main findings for strategic modeling, for macro and for meso, were that, well, link capacity is becoming a kind of a variable thing that is a function basically of the share of autonomous and conventional vehicles on a given link. In macro assignment, this means that the PCU factor for AVs becomes a function of those shares, because it depends actually on which type of vehicle follows which other type. See those different cases on the right-hand side here. And similarly, if you're looking at simulation-based dynamic traffic assignment for meso, for example, then the corresponding parameter would be the reaction time factor, which becomes now a function of who leads and who follows, basically. Okay. Finally, activity-based demand modeling. Well, at this point, I think we can say we all agree that depending on the study objectives, it is a good thing to have ABM in your toolkit. So let's just assume that we want to add it. From a software vendor's perspective, it is still a tricky thing to cover everybody's needs, because there are, let's say, random taste variations as far as different ABM model flavors are concerned. And secondly, we also wanted to support the trade-off between modeling and computational effort on the one hand, and realism and detail of results on the other hand. So what we did in the end was come up with a fairly open framework for ABM modeling in our software, and it's anchored around two carefully chosen data structures that are shown on the left in green here. One for the input, persons and locations, and one for the output of a typical ABM demand model, tour strips, activity executions. What you do between those data structures is pretty much up to you. Showing on this slide is a PTV-only solution, making use of only the components that we provide. For the demand model, you would script whatever you want using a library of Python components for useful functions like discrete choice evaluation and similar. And on the right-hand side, for plan execution, you could, for example, adopt the standard North American practice by aggregating up the demand and assigning it using conventional assignment methods. That's one way of doing it, and it really works. Swiss Railways built an ABM for all of Switzerland with almost 10 million people, so it really works. It's not a toy. But if for some reason you believe you need to bring in other components, that's something that you can also do, because within the same PTV framework, because the Python scripting allows you to do anything in a way, including calling other software. You could also bring in, let's say, ActivitySim as an externally implemented demand model, and maybe MatSim as an agent-based simulation for the plan execution. That's maybe an extreme situation, but you can actually mix and match PTV functionality with external functionality as you see the need. This even opens the door for a dual model approach, something that many agencies are doing these days. They are building activity-based models, but that doesn't mean that they are trashing their aggregate tour-based models at the same time. They rather keep both. And within this framework that I showed you, it's also easy to organize a situation with two models, an aggregate model and disaggregate model side by side. And there is a single container for all the input data for demand and for the supply side that feeds into both. This container would contain disaggregate input data that would be aggregated up for use in the aggregated container and used straight away for the disaggregate model. And by doing it like this, you could even support a workflow where you use both models and not just an either or. Think of a study in which you have a large number of scenarios. You would model these once and run all of the scenarios first through the aggregate model, which is supposedly faster and can act as your quick response tool to develop a first ranking of the scenarios. And then in the end, you end up with a short list of the most promising scenarios, and you run only those through the disaggregate model, invest more runtime, get richer and more detailed results, and then come to your final conclusion. And the nice thing, of course, of this architecture is that you have this non-redundant storage and only a single GUI to work with both of the models. And especially the fact that there is only one scenario management for both models means that you do not have to recode anything when you move from aggregate to disaggregate. Okay, to conclude, as always, strategic models need to prove that they're really relevant to the current policy questions. And these days, it means dealing with new services, new technologies, but also lifestyle changes thanks to COVID. Data may no longer be scarce, but that doesn't mean that the challenge is gone totally, because some data may be biased, and that makes expansion difficult. And some of the new mobility choices are really totally new, so outside the experience of anybody that even stated preference surveys may be difficult. That all means that there is a lot of work to do, which is good for us, good for you, and that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. This has been a very, very helpful overview of the opportunities that are presented here for new ways of modeling in order to handle and to deal with the new questions that are cropping up. I hand over now to the Saudi team, Abdulrahman Mottahar and Dr. Farhan Butt, to present on how they are preparing their systems to answer the new questions. Over to you.
Thanks, Klaus. Good morning, everyone. The focus of this session will be around the challenges of the current national strategic transport model of Saudi Arabia and way to overcome them. First, and before we deep dive into this topic, let me give you a brief about the Saudi National Strategic Transport Model. This model is a classical four-step model and was developed as a part of the Kingdom 2030 National Transport and Logistics Strategy. A wider transport sector strategy with a vision to be a multimodal, sustainable, and futuristic transport and logistics sector, led by natural capability to transform KSA into a global logistic hub, with aspirations such as raising the Kingdom global ranking in the Logistic Performance Index, the LPI, from 49 to 10, and increase the capacity of the Kingdom to welcome Umrah visitor from 8 million to 30 million every year. Also to have 3 Saudi cities be recognized in the top ranked 100 cities in the world. This through inherited and targeted value propositions like the strategic geographical location of KSA among the 3 continents. Next, please. So what are the main challenges? Number of lacunae were seen in this traditional model. First and foremost, the lack of travel demand data. Also, there was no structured behavior data available, and little information on OD patterns and trip chains and trip purpose. In addition, the model lacks nationwide demographic sciences and analytics, and lacks transport survey data for mode split and even route choice. Lastly, regional model calibration and validation was seen as a major challenge. Next, please. Who are the new players and what are the familiar problems? In order to fulfill the rules of managing the national transport system, transport authorities and planning agencies require solid insight into their current national transport network, as well as the ability to forecast these network behavior to a specific event and also interventions. They also need to analyze the current situation and future scenario. Broadening of national transport policy from infrastructure investment to infrastructure management, including financial, efficiency, environmental, economic, safety, land use, energy, demographic, has further increased the need for advanced and more policy-sensitive tool of analysis. The increase of interregional and international mobility requires forecasting tools that go beyond the urban or regional and national level and cut across all transportation modes. Five main technology themes will impact the transport and logistics sector in KSA in the next decade. Passenger and freight movement across all transportation modes are already experiencing disruptions brought by digitalizations, big data, and AI. Um, Competition for national infrastructure investment among regions and for national investment among modes, provinces, and cities has to be resolved by decision support system at the appropriate spatial level. A national transport model ideally addresses the interaction between transport system on one side and the population dynamics and regional development and land use pattern on the other side, requiring an integrated approach for modeling. This is further underlined by increased demand for decision support system capable of providing information on the long-term effects of the infrastructure investment, given the long-term impact of major projects. Next slide, please. Number of questions need to be addressed in order to overcome these challenges. On the strategic level, how can new technologies and mobility help drive our country forward? And where can a new service deliver a revenue? Tactically, we should know how to deliver the targeted benefits and how we match supply and demand. On the operational hand, how do these services integrate with smart cities and smart regions? Also, how do we optimize the service design? And now I will leave it to Dr. Farhan to explain the data needs and way forward.
Next slide, please. Good morning, everyone. I'll just cut to the chase now and try to elaborate on what's the status quo when it comes to data. Abdulrahman, thanks for the introductory part on the initiatives and strategy towards the transportation planning effort. But when we look at the data side, we find that in Saudi Arabia, it's a bit of a challenge. Be it traffic flows on major locations, spot speeds data, structured traffic analysis zone, nationwide or regional scale, or demographic data or census data. All of these data sets are available sporadically, but they are not structured or organized to be used in transportation planning efforts, be it regional efforts, be it national scope efforts. These data sets are there, but they are not organized. We look at the next slide, please. We look at the next slide, and we will find that there are freight data set, for example, is one of the fundamental requirement for strategic models. I must say that if it is there, it must be in the private sector side, but in the public agency side, it is not in a very well organized fashion. The same goes for origin destination data, intermodal data, and some of the onboard surveys, which are required for these strategic efforts for models and planning studies. So I think to begin with, we could dream about these innovative and strategic models, but in order to have the effective tools such as those models, we need these structured and organized data sets. And we need to work on those before we go into developing these models. Next slide, please. So another part is alignment with Vision 2030, which is one of the most important aspects of these innovative strategic transportation planning efforts. Vision 2030 aligns itself with innovative technologies such as connected and autonomous vehicles, impacts of electric vehicles, emerging smart mobility transport systems, intermodal integration, mobility as a service. All of these innovative approaches are there to be integrated into these strategic tools. But how do we do that? This is a very basic question. That how do we achieve this alignment if we don't have required data? That's a big question to answer. Next slide, please. So, given the these data issues, facing these data issues, we propose that there should be a national integrated transport planning package that should be established under the umbrella of Ministry of Transport, and all these municipalities, public government agencies which are involved in transportation planning efforts, and General Authority of Statistics, Saudi Data and Artificial Intelligence Authority, they can all, and many other public agencies who could be involved in data portability effort or data structuring effort, they could join hands under the umbrella of Ministry of Transport, for national integrated transport planning package, and they could integrate all of these data set for transportation planning studies in Saudi Arabia for national and regional scope. Next slide, please. So when it comes to model, we have a classic structure where we have classic four-step model, as Brother Abdulrahman mentioned, and we could look into ABM as Klaus mentioned, that we could look into ABM and tour-based models and complex models. But we must look at the trade-offs on what we have, what we can achieve, and in a defensible, in a reasonable fashion, and what is impossible to achieve. And when it comes to data sets in status quo, doing some of these ABMs or tour-based models could be very challenging, because lacking data, you could definitely develop the structure of the model, but will the outcome make sense? That's a very big question. So this data question, even though it looks very small issue, but it is a very big issue when it comes to developing strategic modeling tools. Next slide, please. So way forward, what is the way forward? How we can resolve this issue? As we have proposed the National Integrated Transport Planning Package for Saudi Arabia, this, the name could be, of course, defined under different stakeholders, but some of the efforts that this package could do would include nationwide standardization of data. This could include municipalities, provincial agencies, and then to the regional scope of Ministry of Transport. Then the data accessibility, which is still a big obstacle in Saudi Arabia. The data should be accessible to the consumers. For example, consulting agencies who are working on the studies, or public agencies. It should not be something very sacred which is not shareable. And once this structured data is available, it should be made accessible to authorized users, which include these consumers. Then, technology, when it comes to new technologies, sky is the limit. We must identify, given, keeping in view what we have, what kind of data structures we have, data sets we have, and then we should make initiatives on what should be included. Our long-range plans, as an example, are, in most cases, free of these innovative technologies. For example, mobility as a service, integration of intermodal activities. All of these, new technologies. When you look at the long-range plans, they don't include them. But yet we will see that the public agencies would talk about these technologies to be included in future. So there has to be some kind of sync that should be developed to include these technologies. Then there should be capacity building effort, which is the most important one. We don't have modelers in Saudi Arabia. Let's be real about this. And we need to train public agency officials on modeling effort, and they can become active users, and they understand the intricacies of these modeling tools. And then lastly, there should be a travel model improvement program, just like in US under the Federal Highway Administration. Here we could develop under the Ministry of Transport National Travel Model Improvement Program, where all the modelers could be member of, and they could debate, discuss their issues, and talk about obstacles, and maybe get some resource from some other agencies where they have experienced those issues and resolved them successfully. And lastly, we must understand that this modeling effort is not something to be done only once, like a road project, where the consultant will come, they will complete the project, and then they go back. No, it is a recurring effort. Every 5 years, for long-range plan, at least your base year changes. So base year change means that you have to update all the data. And if you don't have data, if you have not prepared the data for this recurring effort, then you cannot update your base year. Hence, you cannot update your future forecast. So hence, we must understand that establishing this national integrated transportation planning package is very important, because this will take care of this issue of recurring effort. The members of member agencies of this package will be dedicated to update the base year data sets and all future forecasts, so that any modeling initiative in the nationwide or provincial or municipality level, they don't lack data. They don't hand massage the data. They just have access to structured data. And next slide, please.
2 minutes.
With that, we will just wrap up our presentation, and we'll be very happy to address any questions if you have in the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the two of you. This has been a very interesting presentation on the challenges that are being faced, not just in Saudi Arabia, but in many other countries throughout the world. The increasing complexity of the problems we're facing and the limitations of the data that we need to support the answers to those questions. Therefore, it's a very good presentation for this meeting. I hand over now the presentation to Stephen Bennett from the Integrated Transport Center in the Emirates.
Hi, thank you, Pilo. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephen Bennett. I'm from the Integrated Transport Center in Abu Dhabi, and I've been sort of responsible and part of a team that's developing our updated STEAM Plus modeling framework over the past year or so. And we were asked by our management to look at our model, to review it, and to potentially come up with improvements. Given the fact that there's a lot of different items specific to the Middle East region, particularly in Abu Dhabi. For example, in this region, we have a very diverse population. There's a lot of people that come and arrive every year because of job changes. The distribution of people across the city changes yearly because of a very dynamic rental market. And bringing in all of these factors, both data and modeling issues, we have to address a way to both update and maintain a transport model going forward. Our current STEAM model is used quite extensively. We typically run in the order of 1,800 to 2,000 scenarios every year, and it's hosted on our own private cloud platform at ITC. And it is accessed by upwards of 50, 60 modelers in the region to assist with them completing their infrastructure and development studies. So what we came up with was a fairly comprehensive framework that covers everything from centralizing all of the data coming in and what we have access to, processing that in our analytics system, and then inputting that into the various different modeling packages that we have available here. So we have STEAM, which is based in Cube, but we've also been developing over the past few months a hybrid simulation model in AIMSUM. And in addition to that, we also have an appraisal methodology to look at environmental and economic performance of various different schemes with a number of our partners, such as the Environment Agency Abu Dhabi, that we provide information for in terms of emissions of vehicles. And then as part of that, we have our Bird's Eye platform, which is our data visualization platform from STEAM, but also to visualize the new hybrid model and also to visualize existing condition data. So I'm just going to let this video flow. And what we've done over the past, I think it's 7 months now, we've managed to build a fully integrated modeling framework that links together all of the data, all of the networks, and the different software platforms and analysis platforms to provide our stakeholders with a greater information to assist with the decision-making process. The video is just basically showing that all of the models are intrinsically linked together. They're all based effectively on the same network, which I'll cover in a different slide. But it covers from macro, meso, and micro modeling, and public transport, and normal traditional highway. And this has been built mainly because of the additional data that we have available. So over the past 5-6 months, we've been working with our stakeholders, and we've been collecting and centralizing nearly, I think it's 40 to 50 billion records of data from all the various different stakeholders. The key data that we're really focusing on are the ones that underpin the Bayesian model validation. So things like movement data, and that can be either from cell phones, it can be from the bus ticketing information, or from the taxi fleet that we have available here. Then we have general highway statistics availability. We have information on population and land use from the municipality, but we've also been able to get access to a lot of utility data and consumption data. So if I firstly look at the transport network. So the transport network, we previously had a very coarse network in the top left, which was our old steam model. But we've been talking with our colleagues in our GIS team, and they have their own navigable road network, which is used across the entity and is also used in the wider areas of Abu Dhabi and in other entities. So we envisioned on a project of converting the NRN network to be our central reference for everything that we do in modeling. So the new network is linked to our GIS team. It's linked to the steam model, our hybrid model. All of our traffic data is all linked to this one spatial reference source. So when we do have to do comparisons, we can compare current conditions versus future conditions or various different scenarios very easily. We don't have to worry about translating from one network to another, as everything is as everything has been placed on a common basis. That's enabled us to do a lot more analysis and comparisons to make sure that our models are stronger and more representative of the travel conditions and in the base year. And then the other aspect that we have is very strong, which is the data availability from people's residences or people's movement. So if I use this as an example, this is one tower in a residential area in Abu Dhabi on Reem Island. And with the level of information that we've managed to obtain, we can now estimate the population within each apartment or in each building of this development. We've got records on the number of connections. We have the nationality of the occupier, if they're national or non-national. We know which apartments are either owned or which ones are rented to work out the long-term trend of, are these people likely to be part of a redistribution, for example, if they change their work or if a policy comes in, such as road user charging. We can estimate what proportion are likely to change their home as part of that. Then we have the Etisalat, or the mobile network data information, which also gives us a snapshot of the population density in each area of the city. So this is a cross-check against our population estimate based on water consumption in each building. So we can apply this on a building by building level across the Emirate, and then we can build up our population from a very, very fine level of detail. So an example of that, if I just look at an area of the Abu Dhabi called Khalifa City, so we can break this down and we can work out the total population, the nationals, non-nationals, how many people are employed, the students. And then another data set that we use is from the car registration system. So we know across the city we have 370 to 380 cars per 1,000 of the population. But because of the demographic profile of this area, we can estimate that this area has a higher car ownership level because it has a different income segmentation and because of the nationality profiles that live within this region. So again, from all the municipal data and the building data that we have, we can then go down and look at the supply side information for the area, looking at which land uses are available here, and how it's disaggregated on each zone. It really gives us a very strong baseline for an input into the model to give us more confidence. So, and then using the various different travel data sets that we have, such as cell data, we have bus and taxi origin destinations. We can then estimate where people are traveling to and from, and what are their top destinations from this area. For example, in the morning, where do people commute to on work? And for each of these zones, we can then predict and obtain how they traveled there by car, school bus, taxi, etc. And then lastly, we can do the routing analysis from the other travel data sets that we have. So we can work out which routes that people travel on, if they're going by car, taxi, company bus, and what the level of volumes are from this area traveling outside. So I think one thing I just wanted to say on this, I think from the presentations that I saw this morning, everyone is saying that they want to get hold of data. And I think we've been fortunate with all of our stakeholders to be generous to share that data with us, to give us this level of insights to both travel behavior and to allow us to improve our traffic model to such a level that we can do this very detailed and granular analysis. And then I'm just going to move on to our analysis platform. About a year ago, we undertook a project to allow access to the modeling data for non-transport modelers or non-transport planners. And we've developed a web-based platform last year, which allows us to present either existing condition data, such as traffic counts, bus pickup and drop-off points, bus speeds by line, where the buses are getting delayed. Is it because of congestion, or is it because of just purely there's a large volume of people getting on a bus stop causing a potential delay on the bus? And we're also to be able to present all of these things like bus line ridership in a lot of detail, either line by line or clustering them together to do an additive analysis. And in terms of the comparisons of the model itself, the model is also linked directly to this platform, and we can do comparisons of do minimum versus do something schemes, looking at truck volumes, looking at the level of service of junctions, purely to allow non-modelers to really look at this and think, where are the problems? Can we visualize the problems? Does this match the anecdotal evidence that we're receiving telephone calls or complaints from? This really allows them to just get quick access to the data to validate any problems or concerns that are coming through. And lastly, we've recently updated our model to look at a lot of new modes in terms of AVs or shared services. Because of the flexibility that we've had using Cube, we didn't have to reinvent anything. There's a lot of flexibility in the scripting to allow us to add these facilities very easily and very quickly. For example, we undertook a Hyperloop study in 2017, and it took us about a day and a half, 2 days to adapt our model to include Hyperloop. It wasn't a lot of effort. There were some things that we had to do, but they were not very complicated. But I believe this is going to be covered later on this afternoon in a session with Tor. I think that brings me to a close on what we've been doing in Abu Dhabi to increase the accuracy and representation in detail of the STEAM model. I'm happy to answer any questions come the question and answer session later on, if required.
Thank you, Stephen. That was very impressive. I have to say, I'm very jealous now. I am envious of the facilities you have and the amount of data you have. I would certainly like to have something like even half of that in some of the cities I'm working on at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
We have very few questions. In fact, we have no questions so far in our Q&A section of this session. So I encourage you to submit questions. We have many attendees at the meeting. Submit questions there so that I can select them. I have a few of my own, but I would certainly like to see questions from the audience. The final presentation by Seshagiri Belamara is about a new type of transport model, similar to what Klaus was mentioning at the beginning, an activity-based model, which has been implemented in Qatar. And he will talk to us about the advantages and perhaps constraints that such an approach has. I hand over to you, Dr. Belamara. If we can. Seshagiri? You're muted so far. Giri, you're muted. Giri, could you unmute yourself? There you are.
Go back to the hop-in control page. The microphone is there. Pirlo, if you'd just like to ask some questions to the rest of the panelists,
Okay,
I'll sort this problem out.
Okay. As I said, I was very impressed, Stephen, with your recent presentation on the extraordinary amount of data that you have available. Obviously, we have faced similar problems in other countries, and in general, the problem is that authorities, divisions within authorities, are very reluctant to share data. They say it is proprietary, that is confidential, that they have to preserve that confidentiality. Could you describe us a bit more the process that you follow in order to get this contribution from all stakeholders, which is very impressive?
Yeah, no, thanks, Peter. Yeah, the contributions from all the stakeholders has been welcome, but it's taken a long time. We've been working on data sharing now for 6-7 years, and each year we're getting more and more data. But because there's a lot of open data initiatives coming here, there's a lot of AI and machine learning initiatives coming. These barriers of data sharing are being broken down across all government entities in Abu Dhabi, and there's a lot more willingness to basically contribute to these type of projects.
Okay.
Can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Luis, can you hear my voice?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Sorry for the inconvenience. Good morning to all. Yeah, this is Seshagiri Belamara, is a modeling engineer working in Ministry of Transport and Communication, Qatar. Today, I would like to present about the strategic models we are using in Qatar and the aggregated tour-based model to activity-based model upgrade. I have the few contents like the general background of the Qatar and why evolving the transport infrastructure and upgrade to the QABM and what are the overall QABM structure developed in the Qatar. And we'll be talking about the outputs. So background information about Qatar is a capital of Doha. Area is 11,000 square kilometers. Population existing 2.7 million. And Qatar is hosting the Football World Cup, FIFA 22 World Cup. This will be the first World Cup first World Cup ever to be held in the Arab world. Based on the national vision, set up, define some long-term goals and provide a framework for national strategies and implementation plans can be developed. Evolving the transport infrastructure. Since last 12 years, Qatar is developed all type of studies like master plans, highway design project, assessment the traffic studies, enterprises, upgrade the new public transportation network, and identification of metro network. We use the tour-based activity-based model. Recently, we have upgrade to ongoing through all these projects to an advanced activity-based platform which utilized latest modeling technologies as we highlighted during this presentation. Strategic model, like it's in an activity-based model. Since we are using 12 years, we are keep on updating from the 2006 so up to 2018. The difference between the activity-based model and difference between the activity-based model and the tour-based model. Activities are arrange the multiple tours of 24 hours a day, but in the tour-based model is arrange multiple tours of 24 hours a day, and activity-based model is activities in time and space. Why are upgrading the IBM model? Due to new demographic, new mobility, interaction with households, activity chains are changed, temporal consistency after trips in a day, and dynamic simulation of activities of trips, better understanding of time window, shared ride, and land uses are changed, infrastructure development, major projects are under construction, projects to be built, evolving the transport technology, and policies and demand management. We have a good amount of data, and we are working with the different public stakeholders and private stakeholders. In 2008, we have limited network and the limited capacity of the data. In our period of time, 12 years, we have the good amount of data available in the different government agencies and the private sector. To utilize that data, and in 2019, the Ministry of Transport is developed a activity-based model with using upgraded network, road network, and upgraded public transportation network, using challenges for regulations and traveler choices, changes of the traveler choices, using the new technology system. You are adapted in the activity-based model. Let me discuss about the overall components of the QBM model which we are developed here. There are 4 modules. One is like population synthesizer module, other one is a long-term choice model, third one is a daily activity pattern model, and fourth one is the parking and parking ride model. Let me discuss about each module separately. Population synthesizer. We have recently, for this study, we conducted household interviews, nearly 12,000 samples spread out entire the country. For population synthesis, this module generates a synthetic population using disaggregated information for a random sample of HHI data and aggregate to household and personal level frequency distribution from the census. This module is developed in the Python scripting. The output of this module is synthetic persons and household information with associated socio-economic characteristics. And move on to next, the SIM cells. This is the long-term and mobility models. For this module, input is synthetic population obtained from the POPGen with socioeconomic attributes, and we're adding the network schemes for the attributes. In this module, each person will be assigned primary activities like work and school locations based on the choice model classified by the person groups. These choice models are like the two levels. One is individual level, like school type, what type of school, whether it's university or college or school or kindergarten, and where is this location. And second one is work type. What type of work is labor force or different type of work economical activities in industries. And third one is household level information like household income and household type and vehicle fleet characteristics. To avoid major spatial basis, work and school locations observed from this HHI data are replaced by the prediction using the discrete choice model. Which the model. The outcome of this module is the synthetic population data and its updated work and school locations generated by these SIM cells. And from these SIM cells, it's move on to SIMDAP. SIMDAP, this is a daily activity pattern. This module accounts for land use and transportation level of service attributes to generate the complete daily activity pattern like activities and tours for each individual household of the person. This module is capable for generate the individual person trips and joint trips also. After this, a post-processing tool is generate this activity. Once you're getting the tours, a Python script based tool is doing the post-processing to generate the tours into trips. After this, move on to this parking model. This is the one interesting model we adopted in this activities-based model. This module is from the SIMDAP. We have the destination location of the individual trips generated with the SIMDAP. But in this module, it will be modify the destination location by the capacity restraint mechanism. New set of trip tables are generated because here the input is parking supply. We have input given to this module is number of parkings, number of off-street parking demand and number of off-street parking demand and number of paid parkings demand and number of free parking demand at TAG level. And then we added given the catchment area for the 400 meters. The ones from the SIMDAP module, the destination is identified. The destination, first we check the destination, the parking is available or not with a walking distance of 400 meters. If it is within the zone, the parking is available, then we'll assign to that zone, or otherwise it will move on to the next zone. There also it will check the parking demand is there or not. Then again, if there is no space available, then it will move on to the all adjacent zone of the catchment area 400 meters. Then move on to the matrix aggregator. Here, the model reads the trip table extracted from the SIMDAP and parking model and aggregate them into the zonal level OD demand matrices, which are located into the transportation network using the Visum together with the OD tables. Then after that, the network model QABM has been implemented in the PTV Visum environment, consists of both road and public transportation networks. We adapted multi-user class assignment algorithm, which is implemented in the part of the assignment models. Then, in the activity-based model, we have created one GUI integrated software with all components. First, here we have to select the scenario, which scenario you want to be run the model, and select the convergence criteria, and select the model, which other model runs we need to be run, like execute the PRTSN, PRT model, PUT model, or peak hour models, and parking model, or park and ride models. Then afterwards, you have to select the options to generate the outputs. Once model is finished, we developed a GES link web-based software application. Here, you have to select the scenario and compare the results and finalize the option. And left side, if you see, there is outputs, scenario outputs in the table form. In the right side, you have to see in the each scenario to visually the link flows, delays, whichever we need to do. As a non-modeler or non-technical person can easily understanding based on this web-based application. We have done, there is no good base year model. We cannot do any forecasted year models, because if the base is solid, then only we will understanding the future year implementation plans. If you see the screen line validation, the R-square value is very close. It's pretty good, like 87% in inbound, and outbound is 80%. And trip length frequency also, it's almost close by HHI with the model value. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Seshagiri. It's a very good presentation. We have a few questions, but given that you are here, Seshagiri, at the moment talking, I would like to ask you two particular questions. One, was the calibration process very extensive? How difficult it was? How well? I mean, you show how you match the trip length distributions, and the figures are very good, very well. Did you get a good match on traffic counts, for example, or public transport patronage as well? That would be one question on calibration and validation. And a complementary question is, how long does the model take to run? If you are running a scenario for 2030, how long would it take to run?
Yeah, thank you. First, I would like to discuss about calibration. Yeah, as initially I said, since the activity-based, the tool-based model was developed in the year 2008, and now since it's 12 years, we have the plenty of the data available in the agencies, like road network, for example. We have the good road network. We updated the road network in the activity-based model, and we did so many checks in the Visum. We have Visum as a beautiful platform. You want to be check the rat runs and like for example wrong coding in junctions, and given the number of length, speed, and everything. We have the good database available. That's why we are very confident that that network the supply side is very good. If it is a supply is wrong, so we cannot match the counts in the model values. And what I present in the numbers here, these are all PRT side. It's not in PUT side. So that is one point. And the model run. The model runs, we compare with the tour-based model and activity-based model. Tour-based model, it took nearly 27 hours, but whereas in the activity-based model, it took the full model run, it took 15 hours. That is the beauty of the activity-based model.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Very, very interesting. And very different from other comparisons I've seen in the past, where the activity-based model, in order to reach proper equilibration, takes much longer to run, even when it's run in the cloud with several cores, longer to run than a conventional model. But that's very interesting finding. There is a question for the Saudi team, in particular for Mr. Farhan, Dr. Farhan. Regarding this program for improving the skills and the modeling capabilities of the kingdom. The question is whether you expect some transfer of experience and knowledge from other groups in the region or from elsewhere in the world, and what is the sort of timeline you have in mind in order to achieve this enhanced modeling and planning capability? Can you unmute yourself, Farhan?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
Yeah.
If we have to look at it from a capacity building perspective, there is urgent, pressing need to establish a center of excellence in transportation planning and modeling. Why I am insisting that? Because right now we don't have very organized setup with universities in Saudi Arabia, where public agencies access to universities for projects, and then they take those projects and kind of expand them further. So this arrangement is not there. So in order to benefit, in shortest time, if the center is established and trained experts are invited to conduct courses on intermediate, beginner, or advanced level, and then maybe cohort groups of modelers from all around Saudi Arabia they progress forward from beginners level to advanced level. I think this will be very helpful. And on the second level, whenever there is a modeling project established in or ongoing in Saudi Arabia through consulting firms, I think it should be made mandatory that as part of the process of developing those models, the consulting firms will train at least one or two modelers, which will be residing in the public agencies, and they'll be using those models. I think this will be, in a way, very helpful for consulting firms and all other stakeholders as well, because not only they will then understand their work, but also will be very helpful in maybe making some application level development. For example, in-house development for applications for post-processors. So these two interventions need to happen for the capacity building, I think. And it could be achieved in shorter time, maybe within 1 year or 2 years time. We could have a very good organized cohort group of modelers trained who would understand inputs, processes, modules, post-processors, outputs, what is actually strategically needed from these models. And they are tools, they are not decision makers, they are just tools. And by the way, they will have to use their engineering judgment out on the outputs to make sense out of them. Did I answer your question?
I would think so. However, I would just to make a comment on my own bat. Even if you send all your people to have a PhD on transport modeling, you will still need, in my view, a transfer of experience from elsewhere, because Just technical knowledge is not enough to make a good modeler. You need also experience. You need modelers that have knowledge of what happens in other locations and what is happening in the kingdom as well by observation. And this is a necessary adjunct to the analytical capabilities of a modeler. I have also a general question for Klaus. Klaus, they would like a bit more detail on this potential ability to combine in a single platform both aggregate and disaggregate models within the PTV system.
Okay. The point is actually that there is a single relational data model for all the input and output data in Visum. And of course, the aggregate models make use of this data model all the time already. Now that we added data structures for also disaggregate input and output data for activity-based models and allow the Python scripting that is the preferred scripting method in Visum in general to access both the aggregate and the disaggregate data structures, you can actually construct any combination of a disaggregate and an aggregate model within the same model platform. The second thing is that scenario management encompasses both types of data structure. Scenario management allows you to manage data about a base network, a base version, base model, and of course also the deltas for every build option that you want to consider. And by extending this mechanism to also the input data structures for the activity-based disaggregate modeling, you can imagine a situation in which you cover in the same scenario definition both, let's say, an extension of the supply side, that's conventional, maybe even for a conventional assignment, but also the additional synthetic population for a new housing estate that that you plan in your scenario. And that's the way in which we could make use of those data in both the aggregate and the disaggregate model. In the disaggregate model, we would see this additional synthetic population in the region of the housing estate, whereas in the aggregate model, it would translate to more people in the person groups for the tour-based model.
Thank you, Klaus. I have received the instruction to ask all of you to switch on the camera so that we can see you, not only when you're speaking, but also when you're nodding in agreement or disagreement to what the other speakers are saying. I have an interesting and very timely general question, which is regarding the COVID pandemic. The COVID pandemic has certainly disrupted travel very significantly. Here in Europe, we have found that, for example, micromobility and cycling and walking has increased. And we have also made the explicit decision that we will not collect data during 2020 or even 2021 because there is too much disruption that we consider to be not standard, not normal, not realistic to base a model on it. So I would like to ask all of you, perhaps with the exception of Klaus, but all of you in the region, to comment on both the impact of the pandemic on data collection, and if you can say a couple of words about walking and cycling. My experience of the region is that walking and cycling, because of the weather, is not particularly attractive, but you may have a different view. If we start with Stephen, for example.
Yeah, I think it's a good question because last year we started a major model update program, and within about a month we went into a sort of a citywide or a UAE-wide lockdown, and we put all of our data collection on hold. But that really gave us the push to try and collect as much autonomous data as we can from other agencies. We are, with the data feeds that we are receiving, we're lucky to receive, we are able to monitor the travel conditions within the city on a daily basis to monitor the recovery. We are hoping to do surveys again, maybe within the next 12 to 18 months, but we're monitoring that ongoing. And the second question about walking and cycling. Yeah, we have a number of walking and cycling initiatives in Abu Dhabi, and we have added walking, cycling, and the micromobility e-scooters to our model for this release, because there's been a big uptake of the e-scooters to get around the city for short distance trips, mainly between 3 and 5 kilometers.
Thank you. Abdulrahman, Mottahar, would you like to comment? And then I'll give you the word to Jiri.
Yeah, definitely there is there's disruptions in the previous year, which will indicate on the quality of the data if it's been considered. Currently in the kingdom, we actually still in a development stage of improving our data schemes. So probably we are still a bit behind in data quality, and it is considered to improve in the next couple of years. We have a couple of initiatives to basically enhance data inventory in the Ministry of Transport, and we are working also on building the capabilities and capacity for the model, and enhance the current model and basically transfer it from classical 4-step to a reasonable activity-based or tool-based model. So if I would talk about the cycling and walking, same thing here applies. However, as I said, there is an urgency to consider the importance of having proper data and enhance the data on the existing transport model based on the future vision of the country in terms of its strategic transport and logistic objectives.
Thank you. Seshagiri, Belamara, would you like to comment on the question? You have to unmute yourself. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you.
Hi, Pirlo. Please continue for the moment.
Yeah. Okay. We will. Somebody else wants to comment on this issue? Yes, Dr. Farhan.
Yes, I just wanted to highlight. Actually, I was wondering how this is my comment for Steve. Actually, that how you guys dealt with public transport in COVID-19. That is, it was an issue all over the world, and yes, pedestrian and bicycle is an important issue. But when it comes to COVID, I think the hardest hit sector was public transport because of its sustainability from tariffs and fare. So that is something I would like to know about how UAE handled that in their modeling practice as well as in the real life projects.
In terms of modelling COVID-19, we've not explicitly undertook any modelling of the impact of COVID-19. What our colleagues in our other teams, like in the bus office or the PT sector, have undertaken a number of initiatives to encourage public transport again and going into the new normal. They're doing a lot of sanitization, etc., on the bus network. But in terms of modelling, we're not really looking to model the impact of COVID-19 at the moment.
So did the boarding go down at all, or do you guys any?
Yeah, I can't say too much, but yeah, the boardings have obviously dropped, but they are recovering. We are expecting a strong recovery in terms of public transport because of what's happening in UAE in terms of the mitigation that they're putting in place for COVID-19.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Seshagiri, now is and don't unmute you.
Now hear my voice?
You can hear you.
Still,
we can hear you well. No, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, regarding this cycling and walking, in our new activity-based model, we have coded the network, pedestrian network, but still we didn't model because we don't have surveys on pedestrian side. So once after pandemic is gone, so we will conduct a new set of surveys. If data is available, then we will model to that one. Because this is urged to all the countries because of these pandemics. We didn't predict when the new pandemic will come. So people behavior also be changed from vehicle to non-motorized vehicles.
Thank you.
We are developing on that stage in the model.
Okay. And
If you allow me, I could add that not only passenger travel is affected. I happen to be on the project team for QFMP, that's the next generation Qatar freight model. And in this context as well, it is a thorny issue to pick the right base year for the new model because traffic patterns for freight have also changed significantly this year. Plus, of course, the additional problem of conducting surveys in the first place, reaching out to people and doing face-to-face interviews with anybody.
thank you.
And interestingly, the government of Qatar is already constructed dedicated walk lanes and cycling lanes. That is very good, interesting.
Good. Thank you. I have a general question now, which is actually a combination of some of the questions that have been asked on the Q&A section. And this has got to do with what you've all mentioned, in fact, the diverse population that you have in each of the countries. And this diverse population also, at least in Europe, was affected by the pandemic. And in fact, what we observed with immigration in Europe is that many people went back to their country of origin within the European Union as a result of the pandemic to weather the pandemic in their own country of origins. I mean, there are no own countries in this sense. Now, the problem with this is that in forecasting the future, we are not quite certain how immigration is going to pan out again. And there is a general uncertainty surrounded how immigration, which will affect population in all countries, European and in the Gulf and the region, how immigration will pan out. And therefore, the population forecast, the synthetic populations that we develop, are going to have a higher level of uncertainty than the forecast that we produced 10 years ago. Now, these questions, the level of detail that we are assigning to population today in the models that you have described, activity-based models or just simply tool-based models with a very high microscopic allocation of people to blocks, as in the case of Abu Dhabi, for example. How do you expect to deal with the issue of uncertain forecasts of population in the future, and how will that affect the accuracy of your forecasts in your models, which are very detailed models? And again, we start with Stephen in that case to Not monopoly, because it's a difficult question.
In terms of modelling uncertainty of population, I don't. Well, what we do in Abu Dhabi, we have a central approved growth forecast based on the Department of Economic Development, the municipalities, and also the statistics department. But we do undertake internal sensitivities of both higher and lower growth forecasts when we are doing major scheme business cases. This is purely an internal exercise. This isn't something that we give out to everyone. And we look at different growth areas. So, for example, in Abu Dhabi, some areas are prioritized for some significant fast development. And we look at, with our occupation data, so occupancy data for these buildings, we basically try and overload some of these areas specifically to look and stress test the network that's being developed, just to make sure that the infrastructure is able to cope with some very large changes, either due to population or due to change in rental, because the rental market is dependent on the demand. And when there's a low population, then people move to different areas because it's cheaper. So we have got that factored into our model, and we do those tests internally. This is not something that's done by external consultant.
Okay, thank you. Klaus, do you think this issue I've just mentioned should affect the choice of or the level of details in the models that we should use for strategic forecasting and plan making?
I would generally say with some of the challenges that I've listed, ABM models can be an advantage, not because of the uncertainty. I think the uncertainty adds to the challenge of coming up with enough data powering an ABM. But I would like to point out at least one important motivation for going to an ABM. If we face all these new mobility options, for example, that were on the table in all presentations, some of the new modes in particular are niche offerings, especially some like urban air mobility, which clearly target a population group with very high value of time. Otherwise, they will not get any ridership. And I've not seen any aggregate tour-based or otherwise model in which value of time is highly resolved enough in the person segmentation. So having a model in which really those persons can be pulled from the synthetic population, we know exactly where they live, and we know exactly where potential therefore exists for this high value of time system. That is a good advantage of an ABM.
Yes, you know exactly where they lived in 2019,
yeah,
but you don't know exactly where they will live in 2030.
That's why I say that is a let's say a generic advantage of ABMs for such an application, but it adds to the challenge that now we have to re-estimate where they end up after the pandemic. That's true.
Yeah. Thank you. Seshagiri, your comments? You have been running an ABM model.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, yes, Klaus said.
Mm-hmm. We have time for nothing else because we have reached the end of the time allocated for this presentation. I would like to thank all the speakers. This has been a very interesting set of presentations, different challenges in some of the countries which are at different stages in developing their capabilities for transport demand forecasting and modeling. In many cases, the level of sophistication and detail and the availability of data is far superior to what we find in some European or Latin American countries. In other cases, there are steps towards achieving that interesting goal. But at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to have good transportation planning good forecasting for the future, and good decision making that is actually implemented for the benefit of everybody concerned. Thank you very much. With this, we close the session, and we hope to see you in the networking sessions and also in the platform for the exhibitions of the different facilities and supporters of this conference. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.